right,
Hey,
everybody. We are live for another Kitty Games podcast here on Game Wisdom, where some of the art and science of games. For our topic, we have another roundtable guest joining us, as we're going to be talking about the not so happy topic of what's been going on in 2023 with layoffs and kind of the state of the industry from a game dev's perspective. But first, joining me, my co-host from Casual Game Studio, Joshua Reyes. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Glad to be back from being stuck on the Appalachian Mountains. So I'm back here. It's catching up on dev as usual. Other than that, I'm doing great. It's great to have a guest on here. Finally, someone who is very well versed in this topic. So it's going to be great.
Yep. And our guest is a friend of mine, as well as frequent roundtable guest as well. And Ramin, I'll let you introduce yourself because I'm sure you're also having a very happy week, as we were just talking about.
Well, I mean, I have a nasty habit of very accurately and precisely predicting economic trends in the gaming industry, and we're going to get into that in a moment. But I hate to be the bearer of doom and gloom, but I told you guys so, and but I'll go back and explain what I told you guys so because the paper that explains a lot of what's going on right now I published in 2017. Oh, my name is Ramin Shokrizade. I'm a pioneer in the field of game economics. Uh, I am a co-founder of a gaming studio called Aravant, and we just released a new Unreal Engine Fortnite map uh, um, called um, Giant Monster Arcade. Actually, just a few hours ago. It's good. It's really good.
Do you have we could put like a link down there so people can check it out, or
If
or
you,
they just search for the team? They just search for the term for the name.
I'm not sure. Normally, you would need an island code, and I do have that. Maybe,
Okay, so then
but
we
I don't
drop
want
the
to interrupt
island code
I don't want to interrupt the talk for that.
yeah, we can post that after. We'll put that in
after, yeah,
the notes.
and description.
Yeah. But it is great to have you on, Ramin, and as we've been saying, for our topic this week, it has been a very interesting year when it comes to the game industry, and maybe we'll do a larger roundtable maybe closer to the end of this year to look more on this. But on one hand, we've had some of the most amazing games released, with the likes of Armored Core, Baldur's Gate 3, Starfield is going numbers. I have so many games on my Game of the Year list that's not even funny anymore. Where we still have about 3 months, well, going to be 2 months in about another day or so. On the other hand, though, it has been a very not so great year when it comes to the state of game dev. So, in my thumbnail that I posted, it was announced that Epic laid off 16% of its workforce, which I think was equal to about 800 employees. Embracer Group, that over the last few years they were buying up AA and AAA studios left and right, announced just massive layoffs. So we've had Crystal Dynamics, uh, Creative Assembly, a lot of other studios as well. Even for the indie side, Mimimi Games, who did the Shadow Tactics and their whole stealth line, they announced that they are going under, or they're basically ceasing game development. And it's been one of those things I think for a lot of people outside, especially the gamers, that they're not really thinking about, oh, it's who cares that so and so is losing money when I have all these games to play. So since Ramin, you are the guest and you are definitely well versed in this, probably more than the two of us, at least at this point, I'm going to throw things over to you, and you can talk a little bit more about your article and what has it been from your point of view in terms of what is happening.
Well, there's a lot of things going on, and most of them are occurring on the strategic or global level. We can narrow down on what's going on more specifically with certain genres in the industry later. But I think it's appropriate to set the context for where all this stuff is going and where these pressures are coming from first, and then we can get more specific about some of the nuances that maybe are even more subtle. That the paper I was referring to before was I call it my data implosion paper. It has an actual much longer title, but if you Google data implosion, it should pop up. Especially
The title is "How the Data Implosion Will Trigger the Great Game Dev Correction." So
yes, so we're having a correction. I predicted it would start in mobile, which it did, and now it's
correcting.
The circumstances in mobile splashed over into AAA, and so now the correction is hitting AAA. And what I was describing was that, especially around microtransactions, there was this idea that the if you had enough data scientists, you could optimize the price of your product and ultimately get more revenue for the same product. And because this is one of the things I describe as a multiplier effect, meaning the bigger the product you apply it to, the more money you make. It has a multiplicative effect instead of an additive effect as far as generating revenue. So the biggest companies would be the most likely to employ these analytic methods to try to generate more revenue. And you're going to see that those are often associated with games as a service, and those bigger companies that are probably dominating that list of studios that have ended up laying off recently.
Mm-hmm.
Now the thing is, it may sound good to be able to increase your revenue, but the other way of describing it might explain what's going on here. When you increase your revenue for the same product, if the product doesn't change, but you manage to increase the revenue off of it, that may sound really fantastic. But if I reword this to suggest that you've raised the price of your product, because that's what you're doing, herein lies the problem. If in 2008 we had an economic crash, 2008, 2009, and the one industry that really just took off and actually expanded during that recession was the gaming industry.
Yeah.
And it got this reputation of being recession proof.
Right.
And in fact, as the financial service sector, which caused that implosion, was laying off people, those people read the reports and said, let's move to game dev. And a lot of those people that were in the financial service then moved to and actually ended up taking over the game dev industry. That now you have some of the same problems that happened in 2009 occurring specifically in the gaming industry because of this use of analytic methods to try to just kind of cheat the numbers, is coming back to bite them. Because in 2008, 2009, the reason the gaming industry expanded was because people were broke and largely unemployed, and they needed some form of cheap entertainment. And the cheapest and most reliable entertainment around back in 2009 was gaming.
Also, like in COVID, right?
Yeah.
Well, okay, you're jumping ahead, but absolutely.
Sorry.
So I mean, if people have a lot of free time and they can't work, then they want to do something. And yes, gaming is not only cheap, but now with COVID, it's also relatively safe because you don't have to expose yourself to another biological organism in order to play a game. So it's doubly fantastic. The problem is in 2009, this was data analytics. So that was not a factor in 2009. Now we've had many years of data analytics because I wrote the paper in 2017, and that's when I had enough information to confidently predict that effect. That was 6 years ago. So now we've managed to make the price of games very high, especially in games as a service. I would just point at Diablo Immortal and Diablo 4 as examples of a company trying to absolutely generate the most revenue mathematically possible from the population. And that means those games are actually really expensive, despite maybe being free to play. And when it gets so expensive that going to a movie is cheaper, that's exactly what people will do. They'll go to a movie instead of buying that game, or they'll wait a lot longer to buy a game to see if there's negative reactions. So you might see that with Starfield, for instance. Starfield, in previous years, people would just run out and buy Starfield or pre-order it. Now people might be waiting to see their reviews, and they're saying, "Oh, well, the game's kind of pretty easy, and it's missing a lot of content or something like this." And then maybe then I haven't run out and buy Starfield yet. I haven't bought Starfield yet. I probably will break down at some point. But so gamers are being much more choosy because these aren't the guaranteed cheapest options in the market like they were in 2009. So that's the biggest effect and I go into a lot more detail in the paper on data implosion, especially as it relates to mobile gaming, because discovery is expensive, user acquisition, installation, very expensive in mobile, and that had a compounding effect. It's that plays out a little bit differently in AAA or just in PC gaming in general. Joshua was saying that what if people, this is creating a death spiral. We were having a little conversation right before we started. Joshua was saying this is going to create so you're describing a death spiral, and I'm like, yes, and he says, well, what happens if they get off the death spiral? That's when things get spicy, because that isn't necessarily the solution. Let me take Baldur's Gate 3 as an example. Retail product, no analytics involved. There's no optimization of microtransactions or anything like that. You buy it, you get it. You can play it. There's so much content, you can play it for the next year or two. And it's being hailed as like, taking back gaming for gamers. So it's a fantastic thing for gamers that we're going back to products like this being retail games. Because even if they charge $100 for Baldur's Gate 3, it's a great value for gamers, considering how much mileage you can get out of the game compared to how much you'd have to pay for like a games as a service or anything that has microtransactions. Now, so any ideas of what could be wrong with that? Anyone want to take a guess?
There's no way that's going to keep bringing in continued profit for the studio, because again, it is a self-contained. But then the other point that a lot of people are saying is that no other studio, as we've been saying, is going to be able to really do something along those lines, considering how much of a specialty developer Larian Games is.
Plus, the other sad fact that people are calling this like a unicorn of games, right? When really looking at it, like this should be the normal way that games are made, instead of like the expletive, like extractive process that you mentioned, Rami.
Yeah, no, everything you guys said is right on. But let me again word this differently, so I can help lead you guys down the path I'm looking. One thing that the data implosion, I was describing how game industry was going to be harmed by games costing more. Now, imagine what happens if games cost less. A lot less. Who does that harm?
First, the studios. It will probably hurt the most the developers, because publishers will demand more deals or more revenue on their side for they would pay out.
Of course, race to the bottom again. So
yeah, it's another death spiral, but on the other end, right?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, because it sounds good at first blush when gamers say, "Oh wow, I'm gonna get all this stuff for at a discount." They're like, "Yeah, ooh, taking back gaming for gamers." But the thing is, if gamers reduce their budgets or have the opportunity to reduce their budgets and how much they spend on games, then that means there's less money going into game development.
Yep.
And when there's less money going to game development, the result is
More studios closing, not enough funding to keep going, more games being released that they'll have the chance of a game paying off its development becomes fewer and fewer. What was I was about to say? It's that kind of like you were talking about that misconception gamers have about successes and we're taking things back. It reminds me a lot of what we were talking about in terms of the mobile market. That 10, 12 years ago, people were saying that mobile was going to be this next big gold rush. It was going to be the future of the game industry. I mean, all of us have seen so many talks and discussions about people citing mobile as going to be the future. And they were, again, pointing out the big numbers of stuff like Candy Crush, Angry Birds, Farmville, and even what we see today with the likes of like Honkai, Genshin, all those games. But all that money just becomes kind of collectively pooled into those specific titles. It's not going anywhere else. And if you think that a indie developer can match something MiHoYo can do, that's going to be like borderline impossible unless again we have that like rare unicorn example.
And then also like a side thing that which is already happening as I talk about the AAA malaise is that studios are already reluctant, right, to like do a creative or new IP. So they're going to continue going with the IPs that we have. I think I read something like most IPs in AAA are like 10 years and older that they're using, right? Like they're not creating anything new because why would they want to take a chance if it's so volatile? So.
And plus, they don't have data on anything that's new.
Right.
They have data on anything they've done for 10 years.
And then the data scientists are going to get laid off. Oh,
oh no! I think that's the last thing that's going to happen, but it could happen eventually.
Yeah, they're pretty safe.
Yeah,
they're safe.
And to Josh's point there about investing in something new, earlier this year I interviewed someone who runs like an angel investment group for developers to like get their games in front of angel investors and publishers and stuff like that. And one of the things that he was talking about is how a lot of investors are very gun shy when it comes to like small teams, indie groups. It's that idea of, do I want to invest, maybe $40,000 into a game that could maybe double my money, or do I want to work with this AAA studio that they're asking, 5-6 times that amount, but could potentially earn me even more money? And a lot of the investors seem to want to go for like incredibly high profits. And I think again, like to go back to your point earlier about how so many games have been really investing in more microtransactions, trying to raise the cost of the game, it definitely seems to be kind of evident of that direction.
Now, do we want to make this way more complicated by throwing Web3 in here?
Yeah.
Sure.
I think that's a part of it, isn't it?
I think it is. Mm-hmm. As you guys know, but my viewers may not, Eravant was created as a studio to bridge Web 2 and Web 3. And we're filled with some really well-known, very successful veterans of Web 2. For instance, original Call of Duty developers are probably our core of our production team. And so we really know how to make Web 2. I predicted Web 3 back in 2010 in my third year game development paper. So I felt like we were ready to take on Web 3. And I think we've done fairly well in Web 3. But the thing is, Web 3 was initially perceived as a very high risk environment because it was all new. There was no data. No one really knew how to do it yet. There was no template for how to build things in Web3. But people were throwing around a lot of money in Web3 a couple of years ago, which was a great opportunity for anybody who's got in early. But the people who managed to get a lot of that early money in Web3, and when I say Web3, I'm often talking about blockchain and NFTs for people who don't know what Web3 is. So, uh, there was a lot of craze, there was a lot of hype, and most of what was being produced was not actual games; it was just hype. And many of the studios that actually managed to collect $100 million or more from investors actually had no prior game development experience whatsoever.
Wow.
Which when you think about how hard it is for an indie developer to generate even $500,000 for their game, and they may have a lot of experience. When you look at just how much money was just being thrown out in a stupid way in Web3, it was a disaster waiting to happen. Which again, I was predicting it, and actually I was looking forward to it because I wanted to clear the background noise so that our studio could stand out a little bit better without us having to hype so much because we weren't a hype company. We were actually a production company, and the the hype extended to not only the actual game developers but also the platforms like FTX. FTX was a platform handling cryptocurrencies and generating a lot of hype using unethical / illegal means like wash trading, meaning you're trading stuff back and forth to yourself, making it look like there's a high degree of volume going on on your platform to say, wow, look how amazing our platform is, but it's not real traffic, it's fake traffic. And it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out in trial. But the SEC has started to go after groups that engage in wash trading. Some of the game developers have had wash trading going on, though it's hard to determine who's doing the wash trading. You can see it happening, but you don't know who's responsible. It's a little sometimes it can be easy to hide that in the blockchain. And when that all blew up, it sucked all the oxygen out of the room, and not just in Web3, but that investors that invest in Web3 also were investing in Web2 in many cases. So when FTX imploded and took out, I don't know what it was, 20 billion or something dollars worth of valuation, and that caused all these margin calls and everything else, and has a cascading effect. That just sucked a lot of investment money out of game development that just wouldn't be able to come back. So that has a splash effect onto Web2 games. Because if investors lost all their money, they can't invest anymore. Even if they were like, oh shoot, Web3 is risky, let me move my assets to Web2, then they're like, oops, I don't have any assets anymore. They went bye-bye. Or they're tied up in lawsuits for the next 10 years. So then that money just disappeared that could have gone into game development. And then you've got the pandemic, which they were able to delay. I mean, obviously, if there's a pandemic and everybody's able to produce less because they have to stay home and they can't go to work, then the obvious result is a recession. And the Western companies that had control over their fiat currencies were able to delay that recession, kick that can down the road by printing a lot of money, which devalues your currency. But if everyone else is doing it, then they're all devaluating their currency at the same time, and it isn't as obvious that your currency is devalued until the inflation hits. And the inflation is hitting. And that's causing everybody to raise their interest rates to try to slow the inflation. And that's causing 2008 and 2009 again, because now everybody's going to go underwater because they can't pay the interest on their homes, and it's going to get way worse before it gets better. I hate to be the bearer of bad news.
We
I always
seem
get stuck in this position, but
we always seem to be the bearer of bad news for a lot of these discussions.
I always end up the bad guy.
Yeah, and a lot of really good points there, Ramin. We did get a question earlier. I think we kind of answered it, but I think this is a good clarification. So, Arva in chat asked, why does game dev cost more than it used to, though? Tools are better and faster. We have more people who know how to use those tools. Is this a self-imposed problem on the developer/publisher side?
I would say the indie games have generally gotten cheaper. Mm-hmm. I would say the AAA games have gotten more expensive. And again, I would point at the use of analytics to try to optimize cost or revenue. And so AAA has decided that the way to be successful is to raise prices as high as possible. But that lowers the value of their products. And so people are looking for better values elsewhere than AAA. And often that's the indie environment, which some indie developers have done really good. It's actually helped them quite a bit. But at the same time, if they haven't made it to market yet, and investments have dried up, and they don't have a way to generate an income stream, that was the whole reason they're making a game, was to generate an income stream. If they hadn't finished it, then they can end up being screwed. We could see what was going on here at Air and we did something that was very uncomfortable, probably for us and our player base, is we shifted back to Web 2, and we can make a lot of money in Web 2. We know how to. We've released so many hits as a team, individually. Before we reassembled into this new team, that's not a difficulty for us. But we wanted to go into Web 3 because we wanted to be the pioneers in the space. We wanted to show that Web 3 could benefit gamers and not just be used as a con game. So we were flexing by going into this new space, because when you've already done everything else in the industry, what is there left to do? Well, you innovate in some area. So we pivoted back to Web 2, and we were making Unreal Engine Fortnite maps, which I think they're going to do really well. The reason we did that is if we need more money to finish our Web 3 platform, which is Star Garden, then and we can't do it through investment, then we have to do it through revenue. So we're looking to generate revenue as a hopefully we can pull it off. But that's a tough thing to do for an indie developer. How do you generate revenue to make a product before you have a product?
Right. Yeah. Like building the rocket ship. Like you're trying to build a rocket ship and launch it at the same time with no money. It's very hard to do. So.
And to your point earlier about kind of the collapse of like NFTs and that kind of thing, I mean, 3 years ago, we were just seeing every single major developer was announcing some kind of NFT plan, or they were planning on doing an NFT. I mean, we laughed out when Ubisoft did it. Square Enix was going to try and do something. Even like smaller developers, or I guess like small in this respect. The Dead by Daylight developer, who Behavior, I forget the last part of their studio name, they were going to do NFTs for some of their characters. And again, it was that case, and I know like Ramin and I, we had that discussion, I think like 2-3 years ago about...
we had a roundtable here on that. I had you guys give me hell. You all came with your questions. You're like, oh, I'm going to stump Ramin with this one. And I had to deal with all you guys trying to shoot me down for an hour and a half.
But you still made it through it, though.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
again, like this was something like we and like again, like cause the industry is circular like this. We had this kind of discussion like a few years prior to that with the mobile market and how a lot of developers were jumping into mobile, thinking it was going to be this quick and easy. I'm just going to make an Angry Birds clone or a Farmville clone, and I'll make $5 billion off of all the grandmothers and parents who are looking for some time to kill. But again, the industry just doesn't seem to learn this lesson of trying to force more profit where there isn't any, or where the consumer just gets sick and tired of it.
Well, I mean, there was a lot of stupid stuff going on in Web3. A lot of it was scams, Ponzi schemes, and selling tokens, which were flimsily disguised securities, which the SEC is quite interested in making sure that doesn't happen. And they've been going down the food chain to nail to sue companies that have sold securities in the guise of tokens. We were very careful not to do that. I can't feign ignorance. Oh, I didn't know that was wrong. I don't have that excuse available to me. So, but when there's that much money just being thrown around, I mean, was it Sequoia? I think one of the big investor groups, and everyone else follows them. If they make an investment, everyone else piles in. When they had an investment call with Sam Bankman-Fried, he was playing League of Legends on the call.
Yeah. Yeah.
He wasn't even. You've heard of this. He wasn't even really paying attention. He was playing League of Legends. Well, the presumably younger members of the investment team that were interviewing him were like, "Oh wow, he's able to play League of Legends on an investor call. He must be a genius."
Yeah.
And they were like, "Well, we have to give him all our money because he's just so cool." And I'm just thinking,
can I get away with that with Armored Core? If I tell investors I can beat Armored Core 6 while telling you, can I get like a few $1 million that way?
Well, if you're talking to the right investment, maybe that'll work. I don't know, but the people that followed Sequoia didn't know that was their metric for how to judge qualification for millions of dollars of investment. So they would have questioned it if they had known that. But this all came out after the fact. But that's the wild west that was there, and I can understand why everyone would want to get a piece of that pie. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's so much easier than Kickstarter.
Yep. Again, we said the same things about why everyone started to embrace live service games. Why waste 3 to 5 years making a game that you only pay $60 one time for, when you can make a game that just keeps earning $20-$30 a month per customer for months and months and years on end? And again, like we saw this in 2020 when MiHoYo with Genshin Impact, like when that game just completely overtook. I think it'll be literally 3 years as of I think right now when Genshin Impact came out, and it completely crushed Marvel's Avengers, which is another live service game. And again, it's and this is something that I know we've spoken about a lot. I know I've had a lot of videos on this topic about that kind of ethical side when it comes to monetization and microtransactions. Like you said earlier, I mean, with Web3, how many YouTubers, how many gamers over the last 2-3 years made videos just saying, this is horrible, blockchain is going to ruin the game industry, don't ever touch anything about it? And it's the same.
Yang Yi has just been riding the anti-Web3, and now he gets to say, "Oh, look, I was right the whole time. Web3 was a joke," and he would keep saying that there was you guys know who Yang Yi is.
Yeah.
And he was saying, well, there's no credible person in Web3 that can explain why we should move to Web3. He was very carefully ignoring any, our podcasts, my
Yeah.
papers, and all this stuff. But I don't know if he legitimately didn't know that I'm in the space, or if he just was riding that horse like everybody else on YouTube, trying to get the clicks and everything else. But influencers are really powerful.
Yep.
And if you have enough influencers canceling something, like even an entire niche of the gaming industry, that has an effect. I I'm 90% of in agreement with him, but you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And as we discussed in that podcast, there are some very valuable things that can be done in Web3 for gamers, especially for gamers that are engaging in gaming as a service. And I'm very pro gaming as a service. I'll always be very pro gaming as a service. And I think if the service is good, people will want that service. The solution to the death spiral that's caused by charging too much for games, charging too little for games, is to not focus on the price, but to focus on the quality. If the quality of the game is high, then people will open up their wallets willingly and spend, and it's not even an issue for them. It's just in attempting to make the games cheaper or making them more expensive, it's often quality just becomes a useless metric that's thrown out, and we don't even focus on providing value to the customer anymore. And that's really what's harmed us the most, is we've just failed as an industry because we have forgotten about that. We have all these gimmicks that we learned from all the financial people that piled in from all the gambling industry people that we recruited in order to try to pump dopamine into our games. We did all these gimmicks to try to make money instead of just going back to the source and making quality games. But look how many writers we laid off.
Yep.
Yeah.
How many social media people at Epic got laid off? All the content media people, the ones who are like community management.
The community management, like the online trainers, like it's just swaths of the community. Like I was just on my Twitter feed this morning, I was just seeing so many people that I know and follow and talk to that were so integral to like Unreal Engine that were just destroyed, right? It just really doesn't matter where you stand on the totem pole. You can get axed for profit. And then again, we're forgetting about the quality, right? So.
And to Ramin's
was QA getting cut too?
I did not. I wasn't being able to suss it out yet. I'm still digging. There's still there were some firings today. So it's still happening. Our layoffs, still going on. So we will find out.
To Ramin's point that you just made a minute ago about kind of focusing on quality, it's something that I look at a lot of the more popular like mobile games. Again, I still play Arknights. I keep watching like stuff. I don't play like Genshin or Honkai, but I at least watch like people talk about it. And for these games, like again, these are games where the only way you're getting that hot new character is to either get really lucky or spend money. Yeah. And when like stuff comes out about this, no one's upset. I have never watched one person who covers like a game like Arknights get angry if they didn't get a character, or angry that they had to spend, $50, $100 because they find the quality of the game that high that they're willing to spend for it. And then, on the flip side of that, we look at something like Diablo 4. And like, as Ramin, like, you're the doom and gloom when it comes to the economy side of things. I was predicting doom and gloom for Diablo 4 after I played the beta of it.
Yeah.
And I think, lo and behold, I was proven right by the fact that no one's talking about it. Or at least they're not talking about it from a positive standpoint. And it was one of those games, when you look at it, you can just see all the elements of them trying to maximize profit over quality. And when it becomes that blatant, as we've said, and I know this is something that we've brought up a lot, not just here, but in a lot of our discussions, like gamers are a lot smarter than I think developers and publishers give them credit for. They can sniff out when something isn't right, when the developer is making a change that's explicitly to make the game worse or to drive more profit. I mean, we saw this with Overwatch 2. Like, when Overwatch 2 came to Steam, the collective universe came together to downvote that on Steam in terms of reviews after all the problems. And
yeah. But that's because gamers act as like a hive mind.
Yep.
They share so much information with each other that it's not like an individual. Marketers are used to tricking individuals, but it's a lot harder to trick a hive mind.
And that's kind of how it was like 30 years ago, before the likes of the internet, when the only way we were getting news about the game industry was, a magazine once every 30 days. I mean, again, we've had these discussions. Today, if I want to find information about any game that's out there, there's probably a good 500 to 1,000 videos and streamers and Twitch, and Twitter X/people talking about that game. If you do anything that is considered horrible or wrong, it doesn't get hidden anymore. I don't want to bring up some of the stuff that Ramin told me about in private about some of the less than reputable developers in the mobile space or the 2010s. But, today, if you get caught doing something, everyone knows about it. And then
you get canceled hard.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
They call it steam bombing or whatever,
review bombing. Yep.
Yeah, it's you see those orange letters on the Steam review page, and you're like, oh, I think I'll hold off on this one.
It's color coded now, man.
Yeah, so you don't even have to read anymore. You just have to be able to not be colorblind.
And here's a question for you, Ramin, because I know we talked about this, but I think it's a good one to bring up here. A comment in chat from a Grumpy Dragon mentioned that Diablo 4 still made over $1 billion. And we talk about, and this is something I know we've brought up a lot in terms of the mobile space, and I want you to kind of elaborate on, when we hear about big numbers in live service games, this game brought in $2 billion month one, or $10 billion over its first quarter, why that doesn't necessarily translate into long-term success, or it's not as a positive of a metric for the long-term viability of the game.
Well, I mean, just because you brought in a lot of money doesn't mean you're profitable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you were spending a ton of money on marketing, that's overhead. That can actually be more expensive than the actual development cost. And those games were expensive games to make also. And I would ask, where did that money come from? They seem like the Activision was really aiming at the Chinese market. Mm-hmm. Is that where they were getting most of the revenue from? I'd be interested in seeing how, what the USA numbers are, for instance. I don't know if Steam is as influential, for instance, in China as it is in the USA. And I don't think they even have access to YouTube in China, right?
I think it's Billy, something like that. I think they have their own video or their own kind of platform there. It's definitely not YouTube. So
the means of sharing information may be quite different there. So they may be harder for people to bomb. Certain products in China like they do here. So, the rules would be completely different there. That's why I'd be interested in seeing where the revenue was coming from for those titles. But if they spent more than they got back, I mean, this happens in Hollywood too, where they'll make a movie for $100 million, but they'll spend $200 million marketing in it, and then if they only pull in $150 million, they take a loss.
Mm-hmm.
So if they could bring in all that money, and it could still be a loss for them. If they do end up making money off of it, the bad news is you're going to see more of that. and people will just bomb them harder and harder until at some point they stop doing it. But as long as they can make money, they'll keep doing it.
As a really good example of that, how many EA games over the 2010s had all those like awful microtransactions and try to make it more of a live service game, and they kept doing it and doing it, and I think it eventually imploded for them in a big way. I think that was Star Wars Battlefront 2 was the one that got so big that even Disney had to come in and say, what are you doing with our property? And again, like as you just said, and as we've seen many times over, if a game does really well using any kind of method or means, everyone will try and, take some part of that and make it their own. I mean, the indie space is not immune to this, as the Infinite Bullet Heaven games after Vampire Survivors blew up. And again, Josh, you remember when I went on my little time travel rant of all the trends in the indie space that I've lived through over the past 13 years?
Yeah, huge amount of trends. Yeah, so many to follow.
If consumers don't have a choice, then they'll be forced to pay up in these various schemes, and that's why Baldur's Gate, for instance, got so much positive press from influencers, because now consumers have a choice. Somebody broke ranks and didn't run the microtransaction treadmill, and that means now people can say, "Oh well, I'm choosing this other option that I didn't have for 10 years, and I'm going to just go play Baldur's Gate." Which again, that seemed like a revolution. People are fighting back. But the thing is, when the money dries up, you're going to get layoffs. Maybe these bigger companies need to go bye-bye, but then who's going to make the big games that people want to make? I mean, want to play. Starfield probably could have been a lot better than it ended up being, but it had the advantage of not being microtransaction based.
Mm-hmm. And
so it's still going to be a good value for players, even if they only get 50 hours out of it.
And like Bethesda is a really good example, as what you're saying, in terms of how people have more choices today. Like if we go 20, 30 years in the past, the only studio making, very high level open world CRPGs was Bethesda. People didn't care that the game wasn't, as functional, day one, month one, or you had to wait for expansions and patches. They were it. And then what we saw over the 2010s was the likes of CD Projekt Red, Larian, Obsidian, and so on. So now, like, we saw, like, the first level of this backlash with, what was it, Fallout 76. When it was first released and people were having issues with it, they didn't have to put up with it. They just said, you know what? This game sucks. I got 5 other massively large RPGs I could play. And it is this kind of situation that, as you've said, as what we've talked about, that a lot of AAA studios are in this boat where they can't just keep putting out the same things. Yeah. And if they just try and capitalize on, what is the most profitable right now, a lot of indie studios can just run, laps around them. Yeah. Horror is a really good example. Like, I'm still surprised we haven't seen more AAA studios outside of Capcom try and do more horror after Capcom kind of brought it back. But again, like, as everyone, all the people watching in this chat or watching this record know, horror never died. It was kept alive by indie developers doing different and unique things and keeping the value in that market.
Horror never dies.
Yeah, there's
horror
a good.
Never dies. Yeah.
Damn, I should have used that as the tagline for the book. Oh.
Yeah.
And let's see. Yep, and I think as Orva said in chat, that a lot of developers are kind of mixing audiences with monetization. That you can nickel and dime, let's see, the casual audience with not beloved franchises. I mean, as we were saying earlier, with so many AAA developers trying to reconstitute this stuff for major franchises, the gamers aren't falling for it. If there's a new Battlefield game or new, I think, did the new Gran Turismo have microtransactions?
I
I'm
think
pretty
so.
sure it
I'm
came
pretty
out and
yeah.
everyone stopped talking about it within like a day.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything since it came out, so I'm sure it had microtransaction hardcore. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, you can't take like a well-beloved, like just to put microtransactions on Dark Souls, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or put like a well-beloved franchise that gamers know for sure. And as you said earlier, Josh, like gamers know and they can smell it like right away. And if they're looking at it and they see, I see some data scientist fingerprints on here, and I see a little bit of gambling stuff here, like they can tell and they know that more was allocated to that, right, to extract profit instead of like focusing on the game itself, right? And so just even if like the game quality was not affected in any way, it's already tainted in gamers' eyes, right? So like it's really difficult to take that, like as you mentioned in Battlefield 2 or what was it?
Star Wars Battlefront.
Star Battlefront 2, sorry. Yeah, like on that one, and that was horrific, and because it was taking something that was done well with a good IP, and it took Disney coming in with their hammer to smash them down. It's just that when you're forcing those types of things upon gamers, and especially well established IPs that are known, right? They've never had that included in them at all. Unlike, for example, Genshin Impact, it comes out from day one. It's a high quality game. It's included in it. The gamers know what they're getting. But when you try to just smash it all together, gamers will instantly just, be revolted by it. And then again, like you said, they'll Steam bomb it and stuff like that. So.
Mm-hmm.
And I think AAA developers, they've reached, they're kind of reaching the limit as far as how far they can go with microtransactions. They know the days are numbered, and they're already at the point where they've reached maybe what I would call perfect competition, economic term, for where you get to a point where there's no more profit because everybody's building the same thing, and so everybody's dropping, their prices have dropped to the production cost and no higher. They're looking for the next thing, and for them, they saw NFTs as being essentially microtransactions 2.0. This is the way of rebooting microtransactions and charging even more for microtransactions than they were before. And I mean, I was always opposed to this because I've always been opposed to microtransactions. Well, all the models that I started developing going all the way back to 2005, were ways to counter what I would see as a future, which happened, microtransaction and pay to win movement. I was never for those things. And I'm not for microtransactions 2.0. In my designs, the assets that you could end up ultimately owning, it being written onto the blockchain, are created by players and are never sold by the developer. So the NFTs are generated as part of the play experience, but at no cost to the player. Because what's the point of giving them the freedom of owning their stuff if they have to pay to own their stuff? That's not adding value to the player. That's not creating an environment where, and especially if it's something you can just buy without having to earn it in the game, then that just ends up becoming another form of pay to win. So the approach, when you have people who don't understand value or quality from the perspective of the consumer, if you have those people are the ones deciding, making the decisions on what's going to be made next and what business models are going to be deployed, things will never improve. Things will never improve. And adding a new technology like Web3, it will not benefit anyone if the technology is in the wrong hands. And I would say the same thing about the metaverse. I first started describing the metaverse in my third tier paper in 2010. and I warned that this technology could be used to help people or hurt people, and which way it went would be determined by who had control over that metaverse. If everyone has control over the metaverse, then that can usher in a utopia for mankind. If you know, if Lizard Man is the only person who controls the metaverse, that's going to be instant dystopia.
Yeah.
And I think people sense that. That's why Lizard Man's attempts to monopolize the some future metaverse crashed and burned almost instantly.
Yeah.
Which was a relief to me. But others of his ilk will attempt to do this.
Probably better and with more experience, for sure.
And
I would love to assist our masters in creating the metaverse that I foresaw back in 2010, and I've been working to develop the prerequisite technologies for that. But I'm not going to sit here and hand the keys to all that power to a group that's going to use it just to oppress people. I'm pro-consumer. I'm also pro-investor, but I feel like those two things can be mutually beneficial. I think that what's good for investors can also be good for consumers. I don't play this thing where there's this conflict or this competition between the producers and consumers. I would like to think that, for instance, Apple's success has been because they provided a high quality product that consumers wanted. They didn't ram it down their throats. The Apple marketplace could be a totally different discussion on this, but as far as like their physical products, people they don't have to do a lot of marketing. There's so much demand because people know their products are high quality. So, and that's the way it should be ultimately. You shouldn't have to force somebody to use your product. Like Adobe comes to mind. I can't do anything with a PDF without them trying to lock me into paying for some service for a year or two or something just to convert one document. That I will do anything to get out of that because that's not providing value to me.
And to your point, you were saying about how there's only so much money that a game or a product can pull in. There's something that Josh and we had that discussion about Unity about 2 weeks ago. That one of the things that we saw with the entire kind of collapse of Unity as a trusted platform was this idea that there's only so many people in the world who are game developers, who are people who are using it as an essential product. You can't get more money from the consumer base and not expect like a level of backlash like that. Like if people were expecting, oh, I'm only going to pay $50 a month or $200 a year. These are just throwing out numbers, and then you say, well, you know what? Would you like to pay $600 a month now? A lot of people are gonna be like, no, I don't want to do that. What have you done to make it worth that? And if you can't say anything, well, guess what? We have all these other game engines or all these other options available.
Exactly. Yeah, just like Ramin said, you raise the price and the quality doesn't change, or in fact, even decreases in some cases in Unity. Yeah,
Unity is another one of these platforms you would expect to possibly be building the metaverse, but you can see from the decisions they made recently that they're probably not going down the path that will lead to success there.
No, they're definitely not heading in the successful direction now.
And again, what we said like 2 weeks ago, who knows if Unity will still be around in like 5-6 years from now? Because they just
I think it's a fantastic company.
Yeah.
But it just takes one person to run a fantastic company off of a cliff.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
I'm not naming any names or anything, but
Yep. And it is certainly an issue with everyone trying to like squeeze more money out. And to Mike's comment, yeah, YouTube has turned it on now that they'll direct all the live ads during live streams now. I have it
Yeah.
set to the lowest possible rating for it, but they're still doing it. I'm afraid to even know like how bad like the full ad version will be. Maybe like every 10 seconds of us talking, there'll be
I know.
enough.
I know when we're going live because we get an ad roll before we start. We get a nice ad roll.
And as you, Josh, we were friends back when I butted heads with Disney over regulation of children's games back in 2013, and and I pointed out that they were engaging in anti-consumer behavior, which was heartbreaking for me when I discovered that, because I was a super fan of Disney. I grew up close to Disneyland. I used to go there regularly. I performed at Disneyland twice. I was totally a Disneyland super fan. So to find out that they were allowing or encouraging anti-consumer behavior in games aimed at children was heartbreaking for me. I didn't take any joy in reporting that to regulators. And but I didn't see that improving since I reported that. Just more ways to attempts to evade that, and now you can see Disney's value as a company is cratering. You can't engage in anti-consumer behavior forever before consumers start to notice and start to talk and start to understand what's being done to them, and then start to push back against. I see a lot of influencers trying to, ride that trying to alter that conversation and make it more political than it is. And that I don't like either. I don't like them trying to say that, this is woke or something like this, punish Disney for being woke, but I consider woke to be a racist term when used to denigrate something that it was originally a religious term in the African American community. So I see that as racist, even if it's a non-white person using the term. But
trying to make it a political thing when it's clearly like it's anti-consumerism, right? That's what it is, and you try to divert it and change it. And but I always had a feeling when I was a small kid that Disney was sus. I don't know. That was just me. I always had a little suspicion about them. So.
But they had some issues with racism initially. Now they're trying to go to correct her for that, or maybe overcorrect for that, but which maybe is possible. But I think ultimately the issue with Disney is just that they've engaged in too much anti-consumer behavior, and they're not delivering quality like they used to for that reason.
Yeah, and the same thing with like the game industry, right? That we're bringing it back to the games. I mean. Basically you're starting up a game and you just feel the anti-consumerism, right? Like you are merely something to extract from, and not like you were saying, like the consumer publisher, like it shouldn't be like a war. It should be like something that works together, right? I love this developer. This developer made something great for me. Here's something, not like, man, they're really trying to take something from me, or like somehow, some way, they got some really good data scientists and I can't figure it out. And like so it's like really anti-consumerism video games now, and I think that it's just a huge issue. And I think I got a question. Dr. Grumpy said, do you think that industry will have a slump? And you mentioned that earlier, Rami, that so when around 98 or so, that the industry, from the financial sectors and gambling, they all came over here. But now, do you think that we're going to have an exodus of them? And maybe the correction will include maybe having some of the original, the people that understand the industry also at a business level, but understand the type, like what the Baldur Gate-ism needs to be about the industry. Do you think that will happen?
I think that again, I think Baldur's Gate is actually going to damage the industry, even as it even as it's positioning itself as pro-consumer, because the reason for that is that they've undercharged for the game. What's fantastic about games as a service is that you can take advantage of discriminatory pricing, meaning you can price through your game as low as $0 so that everybody can play it, but price it higher for those that see enough value in the game that they're willing to pay for extras that will bring the cost up much higher that some other people can't afford. The problem is when you make it pay to win, so that the people with money can basically literally harm the people who don't have money, and that just reminds them of real life. They don't play games to be abused just like they are in the real space by people who have more power than they do.
Well, some genres we do, right, Josh?
All the Souls likes in terms of struggle and
pain. Well, yeah, but that's not from another player that has more power or more opportunity than they do. That's just the game itself punishing them, which a little bit of sadism or masochism goes a long way in a game if you're inclined towards that. You don't want things to be too easy. That's the biggest problem that I hear from reviews in Starfield is the same problem I did. I observed with, I think it was Morrowind in like 2003 or something when I was at E3, and I told Todd Howard that in front of the entire press corps, because I was a journalist back then, that I got when he was showing off the game, I said, well, yeah, but I got to max level in 2 days by putting a rock on my keyboard.
Yeah, that was the best.
And Todd Howard turned bright red, but to his credit, he didn't say anything because that was smart.
Yeah, but I maxed out my stealth in prison, like right before I left.
Just firing fireballs at a wall, Right. I don't think game design is Bethesda's strong suit. Todd Howard, I think, is a game designer, but which is why I gave him a hard time. But they make amazing worlds.
Yeah,
I mean, like the Fallout stuff. I mean, it's just amazing just to explore, like Fallout 3 or Fallout 4. I think it was 3 also real space.
No, I think it was just 4.
Okay, yeah, but I mean, just wandering around and
be wrong,
running from crabs and scorpions and stuff. It's just that's really a fantastic experience. But when you make it too easy, then it's just not really exciting. People get bored really easily. And I think that's what they did with Starfield, is they just made it just a cakewalk. It may take more than putting a rock on your keyboard now, but it's not much more.
And I mean, to that point, we were just saying a minute ago about masochism in games. The Souls-like genre blew up during that period in 2009, where more studios were thinking, well, let's just make our games easier. Let's make them so that anyone can beat them, and there's not any real challenge or like spikiness to them. And From Software just kind of like dropped the atomic bomb on that whole discussion. And we even saw this last year with Elden Ring. With
I was going to say, Elden Ring is pretty hard from what I hear.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. But again, it's that situation where the people who are making games aren't really, or the people who are in charge of making games, I should say, aren't really keeping the consumers what they want in mind, or they're just trying to exploit the consumers in a way that, again, people are going to find out about it, and once you kind of burn that bridge, it's never coming back.
What about all the roguelike games? The same thing. And they're like, you are going to die in our game, but you can run it through it again, and maybe it'll be easier the next time. And I think that's very appealing. People love doing that. I mean, I remember playing Rogue, the original Rogue, on ASCII on the UCLA mainframe. Back when, I'm dating myself here, but it was well into the 20th century, and
computers existed.
But I love that. And then the new games are just basically just like that, with more bells and whistles. And I think that, but right now that's just being dominated by the indie indie space, because it's the challenge that people like more than the visuals, and if they can get that challenge, they don't need all the Unreal Engine and everything else that make these big games so fantastic. So I think that it'll be interesting to see if AAA ever does try to make like roguelike games. It would be neat to see what a roguelike game would look like with a big budget. But they're doubling down on graphics. That doesn't necessarily make a good game.
I think that AAA will just acquire the studio that does it and tell them to do it, whip them to do it again. Instead of trying to do it on their own, is what I would think.
I don't think they even have to acquire it; they'll just copy it,
right?
And then use the lawyers to make sure the other
sue them and say, "We made it first, bro. We invented it."
We just patented the name of your company. Now we own you.
I actually heard of that.
You laugh at it, you know it happened.
Yeah, it just happened. Yeah.
Yeah, and that just brought back those painful memories of whatever company patented the Nemesis system from Shadow of War, which I think you could patent a game system. Like, this is something that we talked about, and like, I thought that mechanics cannot be patented, like they're trademarked.
Yeah, I think Nintendo was trying to patent one recently also, right? Something very simple. Yeah, and to this day, you have not seen any devs even dare try and do it. And sometimes I sit here and I'm in front of Unreal Engine and I'm like, I just want to make that system. I don't care. And but yeah, I wouldn't believe that anything could be patent. Ramin, do you know anything about that?
This is one of the things that scares me most is I'm afraid to put my tech out in the space for fear that somebody else will patent it right out from underneath me.
Right.
I have potential investors that want to say, oh, look, you've done this or you've done this, and I don't want to say what, because then they'll know I'm talking about them. But we did a lot of firsts in the Web3 space just in the last few years, and other companies that are still are kicking in Web3 for whatever reason want to get a hold of this tech, and I'm concerned that they'll get that tech and then they'll end up with a patent for it, and I'll be like, wait, we invented that, but if they've got enough money for lawyers, and at the moment we don't have enough money for lawyers, we lose. It has nothing to do with, it's not merit based at all. It's just that's how this legal system's been set up in the West for hundreds of years.
Yeah, pay to win. Positive.
It's not yours unless you can defend it.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, unless you can afford to defend it, prove it. Yeah.
I mean, Mark Zuckerberg didn't make Facebook, but he owns it now because he had the lawyers.
Yep. Let's see. Now, I'm trying to think. There's anything else? Is anything from you, Josh? Because I know we are. Let's see, I think we're a little bit about an hour 15 in.
Okay, well, I just to re-clarify, I just had a question for both of y'all. Like I was saying, like you mentioned earlier, Ramin, just to clarify, do you think that we are in we're in a correction, right? Do you think that there will be an exit of the gambling, the data scientists, the financial sectors that came in, or are the sharks in the water? It's too late. There's no turning back. Do you think they're seeing this is it for the industry? Do you think they're understanding that there is a market cap? We cannot exponentially extract from our consumers and treat them this way, that there will be a correction in that direction? Josh, Ramin?
Let me give you a kind of a sideways example of why it's not going to improve. My understanding is that Johnny Depp will do another Pirates of the Caribbean film if he gets an explicit apology from Disney for them having ejected him from the franchise.
Yeah.
It would cost them nothing. Just a little bit of ego would have to be given up in order to issue this apology.
Like a tweet.
And consumers would love them for it. But they won't do it because the ego is unassailable. I think that the same thing in Gamedev, where they went so all in on data science being the holy grail, and all overnight the salaries of data scientists tripled, and it became a war, as I described in my data implosion paper, of them bragging, I've got more data scientists than you do. It just being like some sort of a dick dance. Can I say that on YouTube?
Yeah.
And so I think that they're not going to want to give up their size. I think it's the last thing they will do. I think Johnny Depp will get an apology before data scientists will be put back where in a more cooperative way to benefit consumers instead of being used to exploit consumers.
Right.
So no, I think AAA will go down with the ship before they admit that wasn't the way to go.
Gotcha.
I think I'm a similar thing like Ramin, that it's going to take pain, I think, for some of these studios to learn this lesson. I mean, we're seeing this with Activision Blizzard. We've seen it before with EA, and we may still be seeing it. So I've heard a lot of things about some like the later Madden and FIFA games. But I think the biggest difference today than it was, again, 30 years ago, one is that consumers are far more enlightened as to what's going on, and two, we have options. Again, like, I can't even think of the last time I played. I mean, again, like, Armored Core, I think, was the last time I bought, like, will be considered a AAA game. And From Software is not, like, in anywhere near the same state of a AAA studio as some of the other ones that we've talked about. Again, I haven't played a Blizzard game in, what, like, 5-6 years, maybe more than that.
Yeah, same here, same here.
Probably longer for me. And I used to be a super fan.
10, maybe?
Mm-hmm. I mean, even like I've been like not as much paying attention to Nintendo these days because of a lot of issues they have when it comes to game preservation, their attack on anyone making a fan game, and even just by the fact that just not seeing as many interesting things that I like, new things that I would want to play their games on. And again, I have over, let's see, how many games do I have in my Steam library right now? I have...
I think it was maxed out. The number doesn't go higher.
I have almost 4,500 games on Steam. Wow. So I'm not, like, anywhere in the position to say, well, I have nothing to do anymore. And again, there are people, we saw this, again, like, from, like, the Twitch streamer and so on, say, well, there's no good games in 2023. Yeah, there were plenty of them. You just have to dig for them. And I think that may be the scariest thing to a lot of the AAA space. That every year that a new indie game blows up, like a Vampire Survivors or a Celeste or a Disco Elysium, people find out that there are studios making fantastic games with a fixed price that don't have microtransactions and monetization. Why do I want to give you? And we've just seen like the MSRP price go up to, what is it now, $70 or $80 for a AAA game. Why should I spend that amount on a AAA game?
I think it needs to market to correct to 150. I think that's what it needs to be corrected to, if I'm wrong.
Let's see. Looks like it's 70 right now.
Yeah, 70, yeah. Because I know there's some going for like 110.
My parting shot would be that I think in order to bring all the low-hanging fruit in interactive media has been cultivated.
Yeah.
There's no more low-hanging fruit.
Yep.
In order to get past it, to get where to the level that movies are at or even beyond, because really games are bigger than movies now. They shouldn't be trying to follow movies. They should be leading the way. Yeah. I think that to reach the next layer, the middle branches, is going to require investment in science. And this is what the game industry has not done. They have spent essentially zero on science. So this is why they iterate instead of innovate, because they're making products for the human brain, and they have no clue how the human brain works, and they're not hiring anybody that knows how the human brain works, and very few people who study neuroscience know how that applies to games. So the pool from scientists that they can hire from is pretty limited, but they're not doing it. They have hired data scientists, and they probably, because they are not scientists themselves, the people running these companies, they probably think that data scientists are scientists. They would probably blow their mind to find out that a data scientist is not a scientist. It's more of an engineer. There's no science involved in data science. It's all mathematics.
Mm-hmm.
So this can confuse people. They think that they have scientists on their in their company. They don't. They don't. Um, and the universities don't train scientists to work in interactive media because there's no demand for it.
Mm-hmm.
So this is again another chicken and the versus the egg thing. Until there's demand, the universities won't produce those people, and when they do, they'll be 10 years behind. There's at least a lag of 10 years between when industry needs something and then academia starts producing it in mass.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what's going to take us to the next space, and we can't build the metaverse either without science.
Mm-hmm. And to Grumpy's comment in chat, it's also challenging for indies. Yep, there are so many games being released, and again, like how many people have copied the latest trending that it will at least lead to some moderate level of success. And again, as we've said, by the time you copy the hottest trend, it's already well past its prime.
Yeah.
Discovery is a huge issue, and that's why part of why influencers have become so powerful. Because if you want your product discovered, you need to go to the influencers. They control all that. They control the access to the consumer.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Yep. Well, I still have you guys here. I mean, and I'm thinking about the human element here, right? The human toll. We're talking, like, originally this was about layoffs and the volatility of the video game industry, and it's kind of an industry that it requires an audience, right? The audience that eventually wants to become a creator, right? And do you think that eventually, like, as people see that this industry is quite volatile, not extremely safe, and really difficult to make it in ad, like, for example, as an indie dev, if you work for AAA, I mean, you're a unicorn. You're considered a unicorn to stay in the industry for 5 years, right? Do you think that we're going to lose so much talent that people won't know how to operate the printing press anymore, for example? That we will have, like, a dark age of video games coming up soon due to this?
You're going to have AI taking over a lot of jobs that are going to be lost. That's it. Yeah. If the challenge is figuring out how to get AI to replace a human in game development, that's where the focus will be, is figure out how to train AI to replace humans to make games, because it'll end up being cheaper to have AI do it than to pay a human for it. And you're going to see this across multiple industries, but definitely it's going to happen in game development. And
I'm thoroughly depressed. I appreciate you.
That's not a higher level of branches. That's just a way of optimizing for cost, so that they can reduce their production costs and make bigger games at a lower cost, but not necessarily a higher quality game. Again, you want higher quality. You need science, and you can't get science from AI, because AI is just basically a goblin that runs around and steals stuff from humans and gives it back to humans and gives them what they think that the humans want.
I found it for you. Here it is. Here's the answer.
Yeah, mister. I got it. But it isn't creating new the kind of new stuff that a scientist could.
And I guess that takes me to, I guess, like a final question for both of you, then, and also maybe for chat. One of the biggest rumblings, like speaking about the use of AI, one of the things that really like dominated the cycle or the news cycle over the last few months was the SAG-AFTRA WGA strike, and a lot of that had to do with being afraid, and deservedly so, of excuse me, of having AI actors, AI writers, and so on, just completely taking over and cutting out a lot of that market. And when all this, like as of this week, the strike has ended, at least the WGA strike. And a lot of people, and this again has been something we've been, slowly seeing rumblings for the last 5 years about, have discussed a game dev union. And I'm just wondering if, with all this doom and gloom, the literal fact that Epic Games, one of the more successful studios, just had to lay off over 800 people, despite having massive profits, like, is it...
Okay, wait. I have to check you there. You just said the P word.
Profit.
People?
Or...
High revenues does not mean high profits.
High profits. Okay.
Companies like Epic or Riot, they have huge revenues, but their profit margins are razor thin, if not zero.
Hold on, I got the profit margin right here. It was very little. They spent a ton. So basically it was like, okay, I'll come back to you in a second. I can't find it. I got too many tabs.
But
I would rather have you answer this than me, because I'm afraid I might leak some inside information. But if you're looking up something that's public, that's completely fair game.
Okay.
Yeah, it's public. I just can't find my tab.
All right. Well, Josh is looking that up. So the question again is: do you think we're past that point, or do you think there will be some kind of formal game dev union? Because it's something that we've been talking about and murmuring about for the last 20 years. But has, the straw finally broke the camel's back for it?
I think that it's much easier just to replace people with AI than it is to try to... who benefits from empowering game developers? Only the actual employees, and they're about to be liquidated. So I don't see that happening at all. I do not see that as being the trend.
Yeah.
When I started doing the research for third tier game development, I thought the end result of my research was going to be that online games were going to bring people together and create a new warm fuzzy world where nationalism would disintegrate and people would be brought together by games. But I found out during my research, and ultimately what I published, was not that. What I wanted the future of gaming to be was not what I determined it was going to be. Actually, it was quite the opposite. And nationalism has actually risen over the years. And ultimately, what's going to break that down is not going to be gaming per se. It's going to be the metaverse. But the metaverse is not what the big boys want it to be, because the big boys want it to be something they can control personally, and that would be the highway to dystopia. So I would love to give you guys, again, I'm gonna have to be the doom and gloom guy here. The art, all these influencers are bagging on the Writers Guild and giving them a hard time for striking, but they conveniently skirt past mentioning anything about AI, and this is really the core issue for the writers, is that their work is just going to be stolen.
Yeah,
and
that
then
was the
they
caveat,
won't be needed
right?
anymore.
Yeah. That was the caveat for the agreement, is that they could train it on some of their data, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Anything that ends up in the public space, it doesn't even have to necessarily be public space. It's just going to be stolen and used by AI and then fed back to the big boys, and they don't have to credit those people at all.
Yeah.
I mean, we were talking about how bad it is, the patent system, how it favors the big boys. Well, AI is like that on steroids.
Indeed.
Mm-hmm. Were you
Yeah.
able to find the?
Yeah. So okay. So Epic is on Razor. They spent 3.9 billion in revenue. I mean, they made 3.9 in revenue, but they spent 3.5 billion. So that leaves them 302 million. So all they made is 2 million after spending 3.9 billion dollars. Right. So that's not a lot for that company at all.
I mean, then that's what they've reported, so it could be even smaller than that.
It could be even smaller than that. They're I mean, you know, and this is everybody like believed like, oh wow, Epic is so solvent, they would never be affected in any way, and so I think that's why variations of this are kind of like very canary in the coal mine for a lot of people that haven't been paying attention, is that this is what has been going on. This is endemic in gaming. Josh?
That actually brings up a question that I'm just wondering about, because I'm sure there was probably a very simple answer to this, but I'm just not thinking of it. When we, as you just said, like they had they earned 3.9, but they spent about 3.5. When we look at these kinds of long form companies like this, like again, like Epic is not a small studio. Their name is their brand, much like Unity and so on. How are their costs still so high? Considering again, like they really don't need to do a lot of marketing anymore. Like, right. Where is that cost coming from?
Perfect competition. You know, everybody's been doing the same stuff over and over again for so long that everybody's gotten it as cheap as it can get, and the margins are getting smaller and smaller the more people are in that space. So in order to break out of the space, they know they have to do something different. And if they're going to spend $70 million giving that away to creators in Unreal Engine Fortnite, which my company just happens to be producing products in right now, and we released our first product today, then obviously Epic sees that as their exit strategy. That's how they're going to take what they made up to this point and create the next big thing. I'm entirely happy to help them with that.
And I guess here's my final like doom and gloom question then. Do you think we're entering that era where like the AAA blockbuster games are going to really like fade away or just not be as impactful anymore? Because it just seems that way, at least like again for us, we're kind of like the outliers. We are not general consumers. I am certainly not one anymore. So like for me, when I hear about a new Grand Theft Auto, a new Last of Us, even like a new Mario game these days, I'm just like, okay.
I was kind of depressed. I was like, Josh, why are you not hyped for the new Mario game? And I'm like, I'm just not. Just not.
Yeah. You know, I just bought like 15 shmups and puzzle games over the last 2 days on Steam, so I'm kind of going through those. But
I had the shmup thing up for Steam, and the wife walks in. She's like, "What's a shmup?" And I'm like, "It's a shoot 'em up game."
Don't get me on that. We'll be here for another hour.
I think AAA will get replaced by a bunch of user generated content, which will then be farmed by AI, and then it'll become circular. And pretty soon you'll be able to just have AI making games for us.
Yeah.
There we go. For the chat, there's your very happy note as we
your happy ending
for our discussion.
But when I grow up, I want to be one of the first human AI diplomats. I've been saying that for 10, 20 years. So when I grow up, that's what I want to be. That's what I want my career to be. I'm robotic enough that I can handle it.
Yeah, my wife constantly, she's like, she does not believe that I'm not AI. I failed the what is it, the test that you take to prove you're not AI. I totally failed it. Yeah,
the Turing test or something.
The Turing test. I took it and I failed it. So
I'm just saying,
you're not going to recognize the world in 5 years. You will not recognize the world in 5 years.
Yeah.
So how many?
We live in crazy times.
So how many days are we from like Matrix robots taking over, or maybe a Judgment Day? Like how many, like, or
Now,
maybe a combination of the two? Are we?
I have 100% success rate on my prediction papers over the last 15 years, and I've had some pretty wild prediction papers. And there's some things I don't publish.
you should publish them. Publish it. Yeah, no, I totally agree with you, Ramin. I think that AAA is going to become a very regurgitative, just regurgitating what has already been made over and over again, and people will accept it, right? They're going to be like, okay, that's just what AAA is. That's what the Hollywood of video games makes. And if I do desire other experiences, the indie space will be there. I do not know in what capacity, like it will be there, but I'm pretty sure that there will be, from here until now, there will be passionate game developers that will always be pushing boundaries and trying new things. And so that will always be there. But as far as AAA, I think that is just apex. I do not think that there's going to be like any new breakout thing that's going to come out from AAA that will amaze people and say, ah, yes, this is new gaming. I don't feel that happening. So yeah.
I think Epic has the right idea to create tools for players to make stuff, and then somebody who, and it doesn't have to be Epic, but somebody will come in with AI and farm that information if they can, and then use that. Like part of the reason I don't publish certain things, certain sciences that I developed, is because I don't know who will use that information. I got to watch Nobel, the person who made the Nobel Peace Prize, and all these other Nobel Prizes. He did that out of guilt after having invented and patenting dynamite, and he became a mega rich from that.
Oh, how fun!
But he felt bad about it. I don't know if the guys at Cambridge who developed psychometric modeling feel bad about what they did, but their crap got stolen and weaponized instantly by a billionaire in the form of Cambridge Analytica. And it was very potent, and the world was not ready for it. And I've been watching that technology move through the ecosphere. I don't talk about it.
That's for the next cast.
There's a lot of science is not necessarily a good thing. It depends on how it's used. Science is and so as a scientist, I have to be careful, because if I just put something out just to try to get some fame, or to try to make a quick buck, I could be riddled with guilt for the rest of my life if the timing isn't right.
All right, but I think with that note, we'll wrap things up for this chat. This has been really great. Thank you again, Ramin, for finding the time and coming on and chatting with us.
Well, I'm glad you guys invited me on this topic, because unlike some other topics in gaming, I feel pretty confident talking about this one.
So, before we wrap things up, again, for Josh and I, we have all of our information down below. We say that we use the same spiel every week. But for you, anything you want to mention, links, socials, whatever, and I'll try and include them in the notes when this goes up recorded.
Play Giant Monster Arcade on UEFN.
And
our giant kaiju are super cool, and we have fart noises, and we have an amazing voice actress.
All right, and I'll have the links to all your other stuff from the roundtable down below as well. But again, for me, do the YouTubing stuff. Check out our Discord and Patreon for my game recommendation newsletter. Buy all the copies of the books. It will starve off the game industry collapse if everyone buys 1,000 copies of my books.
Definitely, if you want to start off the game industry collapse, wishlist my games down below. Join the Game Wisdom Discord. Thanks, Ramin, and that's it.
Yeah.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yep, thank you again. Josh and I will be back for our show next Saturday around 5 p.m. Everyone, have a great rest of your weekend, and come back for daily discussions on game design here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. Until next time, take care.